We may finally be at the end of globalization after several decades. Although in 2021, with a 9% increase in imports and exports as a percentage of GDP, the EU recovered to a level higher than before the COVID 19 pandemic. Yet events of recent years have caused fractures along geopolitical lines, prompting both leaders and companies to reevaluate who they do business with. This is causing a decrease in global cross border businesses and aiding geo-economic fragmentation. So is the 30-year globalization era over, or are we entering a new, uncertain, but increasingly value-driven world order? Join us as we examine this issue and answer the question, is this the end of globalism? Globalization and the attack of COVID-19. After the Cold War ended, globalization took hold as the world became a network of interconnected economies. But amid the turmoil of recovering from the effect of the war, a group of countries capitalized on its new reality and thrived. This new reality is the technology driven globalization that emerged in the 1990s, delivering much to the global economies. Supply chains spread like wildfire, reaching even the most distant countries and raising worldwide economic levels. However, with the immense amount of goods brought about by this interconnectivity, there is a sliver of backlash as pathogens and crises cross borders more efficiently, resulting in global disruptions, most notably the COVID 19 pandemic. Although some economists believe globalization was in trouble before the pandemic a decade ago. One reason is that technological drivers are now fading, with complex supply webs reaching their limit. New and advanced manufacturing techniques are now resulting in the onshoring of production rather than outsourcing to low cost labor countries as previously seen, dampening trade between nations. Furthermore, globalization was damaged way before the pandemic induced economic blow from sealed borders and disrupted commerce, this being narrowed down to the global financial crisis and the US China trade war. The pandemic has shaken the ground under our feet, further exposing the fragility of the global economies and intensifying some of the pushback against globalization. The lockdowns brought about fears that supply chain dependencies would cause worldwide disruptions. However, the supply chain web has continued to function over the past year, coping well with a shift in spending from services to goods production in many advanced economies. In addition, governments did not attempt to aid domestic industries by implementing policies restricting international trade, thus easing concerns of widespread protectionism and the dismantling of global supply chains. Hence, as economies reopen after the COVID, there are doubts about whether globalization will return quickly and be as carefree as before. The impact of COVID 19 on EU food demands. The total footprint of the EU's expenditure on food related sectors is broken down into direct, first order, and supply chain impacts. For example, the EU's food demand is responsible for about 5% of direct particulate matter PM emissions, 5% in the first order, and the remaining 16% in upstream supply chains. The bar graphs represent the contribution of domestic production, intra-EU trade, or imports to the overall consumption-based footprint for the EU's food demand. For example, 50% of carbon dioxide emissions take place within the EU. Intra-EU trade for meeting the EU's final demand for food, and the remaining 50% carbon dioxide emissions take place outside of the EU. Therefore, even though the EU agri-food supply chain demonstrated high resilience during the pandemic, the value of the output of the agricultural industry declined by 1.4% in 2020 compared to 2019. However, compared to the 2015 through 2019 average, it grew by 2.9%. Farm incomes also reduced compared to 2019 by 7.9%, corresponding to 7.1 billion euros. During the first wave of the pandemic, European farmers suffered significant economic losses due to supply chain disruptions and the closure of specific trade channels. Those disruptions led to production surpluses, and in the absence of targeted market management measures across all sectors, surpluses had to be disposed of, leading to numerous losses. The EU policies to promote sustainable agriculture after the pandemic. After COVID 19, the leadership of the EU has repeatedly voiced its ambition to promote open, fair, and sustainable trade policies and European values through trade. In February 2021, the European Commission published its trade review policy, an open, sustainable, and assertive trade policy. It notably suggests that the Commission will propose a chapter on sustainable food systems for future trade agreements. It identifies as a headline action the need to seek commitments from G20 partners on climate neutrality, strengthen cooperation on other aspects of the Green Deal, such as biodiversity, sustainable food policy, pollution, and the circular economy, and propose to make the respect of the Paris Agreement an essential element in all future contracts. In July 2021, the European Commission adopted the new EU forest strategy, which reaffirms its total commitment to ensure that products from the EU and other countries sold on the EU market do not contribute to global deforestation. The consequences of deforestation are wide ranging, from climate change to desertification to soil erosion to habitat loss, leading to wildlife extinction. Although the farm to fork strategy is an initiative that aims to provide sustainable food systems while creating opportunities for food chain operators through innovative technologies and scientific advancements. With increasing public awareness and demand for sustainable food, the strategy seeks to benefit all stakeholders. Similarly, the adoption of the European Green Deal and Fit for 55 package clarified the climate ambitions of the EU, but also propelled the debates around policy coherence for sustainable development and the risks of carbon leakage at the forefront of EU policy decisions. EU's recent regulations that prompted the farmers' protest. However, the EU introduced new rules to improve biodiversity and address climate change, such as requiring farmers to leave 4% of farmland fallow, meaning not planting anything in it for a season. The Commission responded by exempting EU farmers for 2024 from the requirement while still being able to receive EU farm support payments. Still, they would need to grow crops without applying pesticides instead. The largest farmers' groups in Spain claim that environmental regulations are undermining the profitability of crops and increasing food prices. Protesters in France say that some of the climate-focused policies are seen as contradictory. In November of last year, EU politicians discarded the proposed bill on sustainable use of pesticides, one of the eminent clauses of the farm-to-fork strategy. Although the bill aimed to promote organic agriculture, it failed to see the light of day. The backlash came not only from the farmers, but also from right-wing politicians who believed that the bill could lead to a negative impact on crop yields, thus disrupting food production. The leading agricultural group of the EU, Copa-Cogeca, criticized the bill. European farmers' current grievances. Europe's farmers are not alone in feeling the pinch from a worldwide pandemic, extreme weather, and supply chain effects of each in the past 2 years. But in recent weeks, farmers' protest movements, each with their grievances in different countries, have quickly merged into a more extensive campaign against the European Union. In many parts of Europe, the protests have escalated into roadblocks, reflecting the anger over the rising prices, low wages, and the EU's environmental regulations. The competition in the local food industry further worsens the situation, leaving little hope for the farmers. The signs of the protest were indicative of the farmers' ever-increasing ire. The plight of the farmers is not just linked to specific state policy measures. Still, it's also an attempt to defy the EU's environmental regulations and sustainability vision related to the coming times. Similarly, the agricultural workers in Germany are protesting against the government's plan to cut diesel subsidies. The farmers in France are protesting against the excessive regulations in terms of their agriculture activities. Their peers in the Netherlands are protesting against the government's environmental plans aimed at reducing livestock population to cut down emissions. In addition, farmers in France have argued that a push by the government and retailers to bring down food inflation has left many producers unable to cover high costs for transport, energy, and fertilizer. The price of nitrogen, a primary nutrient in fertilizer, increased 149% between September 2021 and September 2022 in the EU. Farmers in transit countries say the promised out channels are not working out as planned, with goods flooding the market and putting pressure on European prices while not meeting environmental standards imposed on EU farmers. New World Order, African regionalism. Any long-term solution to global food security and sustainable agriculture begins with the soil. Soil health is not only about preserving life beneath our feet. It makes all life above ground possible, from plants to people. An approach to farming that emphasizes soil health and customized fertilization for sustainable high yields is key to reducing agriculture's carbon footprint. This is a win-win. Healthier soil enhances biodiversity, actively suck harmful carbon from the atmosphere, while maximizing yields per acre reduces pressure globally to convert forests and grasslands to agriculture. Additionally, technology is global, but innovation is local. Soil characteristics and growing conditions vary widely globally, and even within each continent, country, and region. This calls for a new approach to crop nutrition that shifts from the commoditized products to customized crop nutrients adapted to different crops and soils and applied at the right time. Delivering these is entirely possible in Africa using established precision farming techniques which observe, measure, and respond to changes in field and crops. For example, mobile laboratories are already crossing Africa, collecting soil samples covering millions of hectares. With this data, farmers can map which parcels of land require what type of nourishment and when. More efficient application of the right fertilizer, only with the specific soil and crop needs and will use, reduces waste and runoff into ground and surface water. It also lowers costs while boosting yields per acre. Additionally, as the fight against food shortage escalates and economies continue to navigate the so-called polycrisis era, many experts maintain that keeping the global economy whole and intact is vital. The International Monetary Fund has warned that global fragmentation could cost the global economy up to 7% of its GDP. Hence, regional integration will remain the key to improving economic resilience without harming growth and could preserve and expand the international trade that powers the global economy. However, given an enormous potential to produce food, Africa has around 60% of the world's arable land. However, food production is just a single step in the agricultural supply chain from farm to fork. The sourcing requirements, international and regional agricultural supply chains also come into play. A thriving agriculture sector in Africa is essentially not only for the continent's development, but also for a time when global food prices are skyrocketing. Therefore, speeding up the farmers' revolution will require substantial collective effort and commitment from a broad range of international partners. Another chance for globalization to stand its ground. Thanks for watching. Will African regional development truly impact EU agricultural sustainability? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.